The Wellington Palace Hotel gleamed like a crown jewel in the heart of New York City, its marble floors reflecting the fractured light of a massive crystal chandelier that hung like a frozen cascade in the lobby. It was a place where wealth whispered and power bowed, where every detail, from the precise fold of Egyptian cotton napkins to the exact temperature of the presidential suite, was engineered for perfection. But on the morning of August 13th, 2025, the air inside the hotel crackled with a different kind of electricity, anticipation laced with dread. In just a few hours, Mr. Wei Chen, a Chinese billionaire whose investment empire spanned 35 luxury properties across the globe, would walk through those grand glass doors. For James Carter, the hotel's general manager, this was no ordinary guest. This was the man who could catapult the Wellington Natalya, Ukraine, into a global hospitality titan or send them all running. James Carter, a wiry man in his late 40s with a reputation for surgical precision and management, stood at the edge of the lobby, his tailored navy suit pressed to perfection, his tie a flawless knot. He adjusted his cufflinks, his sharp gray eyes scanning the bustling staff as they darted between tasks. Everything must be invisible today. He barked into his lapel mic, his voice low but sharp with urgency. No housekeeping staff in the lobby during Mr. Chen's arrival. Clear the area. Now. The head of housekeeping, Laura Mitchell, nodded briskly from across the lobby, her expression calm but her shoulders tense. She relayed the order through her walkie-talkie, unaware that one of her team, Sophie Bennett, was already nearby, polishing a brass fixture with the quiet efficiency of someone who had mastered invisibility. Sophie, 32, her gray uniform blending into the background, moved with practiced precision, her hands swift but her mind elsewhere on the latest issue of China Economic Review tucked into her work bag, its pages dog-eared from late-night reading. 3 hours earlier, the Wellington Palace had been a whirlwind of preparation. The five-star hotel, a favorite of diplomats, tech moguls, and Hollywood elites, was no stranger to high-stakes guests, but Mr. Chen's visit was a different beast. James Carter had called an emergency staff meeting in the employee break room, pacing with the intensity of a general addressing his troops. Mr. Wei Chen arrives at precisely 2 p.m., he announced, his voice clipped, authoritative. His investment group controls over 30 luxury properties worldwide, and he's considering adding the Wellington to his portfolio. His fingers grazed his already impeccable tie, a nervous tick betraying the stakes. This could mean international expansion for all of us. The department heads nodded eagerly, each outlining their preparations. The head chef, a wiry Frenchman named Pierre, detailed a menu of authentic Chinese delicacies, hand-pulled noodles, Sichuan spiced dumplings, and jasmine tea sourced from Fujian province. The maintenance supervisor confirmed the presidential suite was set to exactly 72 degrees Fahrenheit per Mr. Chen's assistant's instructions. The concierge, a young woman with a perpetually anxious smile, reported VIP access to the city's most exclusive venues, including a private box at the Met for Chen's favorite opera. His net worth exceeds the GDP of some small nations. James added, his voice dropping an octave, his eyes scanning each face in the room. One misstep and we can kiss this opportunity goodbye. The front desk manager, Sarah, raised her hand tentatively. Sir, I've heard Mr. Chen prefers conducting business in Mandarin. Should we arrange a translator? James waved her off, his confidence unshaken. His assistant assured me Mr. Chen speaks excellent English. Besides, we've upgraded all hotel devices with the latest AI translation software. He tapped his smartphone, a sleek device fresh off the 2025 production line. It's practically human. As the meeting dispersed, James stopped Laura Mitchell. Laura, your team needs to be invisible today. Rooms maintained as if by magic. No guest should see your people working. Of course, sir, Lava replied, her tone steady. They know the drill. Outside, the hotel transformed into a stage for a meticulously choreographed performance. Fresh orchids materialized in every corner, their scent subtle but deliberate. Staff practiced their most professional smiles in break room mirrors. Security teams, dressed in discreet black suits, scanned the perimeter with earpieces buzzing. The Wellington wasn't just a hotel today, it was a battlefield, and James Carter was its commander. James, who had clawed his way from front desk clerk to general manager over 2 decades, adjusted the lobby's ambient music to a precise 6.5 decibels and tilted a welcome banner to a perfect 45-degree angle. Every detail was his domain, his 20-year career, a testament to his obsession with control. The Chun meeting wasn't just about the hotel's future, it was about his own. The regional director had dangled a promotion to the corporate office in Singapore if he secured this deal. A corner office, a view of Marina Bay, a validation of every missed birthday, every late night, every sacrifice that had cost him his marriage. He checked his watch. 1 hour until Chun's arrival. He straightened a slightly crooked Monet reproduction on the wall, allowing himself a fleeting moment of satisfaction. Everything was perfect. Everything was under control. In the East Wing's executive suite, Sophie Bennett moved like a shadow, her movements swift and silent. 4 years at the Wellington had honed her ability to disappear into the opulence she maintained. She tucked fresh Egyptian cotton sheets with hospital corners, aligned monogram pillowcases with geometric precision, and placed a white tea and jasmine diffuser imported from Faijian, per Chen's specifications, 3 feet from the window to avoid direct sunlight. Proper diffusion requires precise placement, she murmured in flawless Mandarin, a language she'd mastered during 5 years in Beijing. Her fingers brushed a dog-eared copy of Advanced International Trade Theory in her work bag, nestled beside a worn Mandarin English dictionary. Her walkie-talkie crackled. All housekeeping staff, finish your rooms and retreat to service areas. Laura's voice instructed. VIP arrival in 50 minutes. Understood, Sophie replied, quickening her pace. As she polished the bathroom's mosaic mirrors, her fragmented reflection stared back a bachelor's in international relations, a master's in East Asian linguistics, fluent in Mandarin, Cantonese, and Japanese, all leading to this. Pushing a housekeeping cart through America's elite playgrounds. 4 years ago, she'd returned from Beijing with dreams of shaping global business deals. 300 rejection letters later, her student loans demanded payment. The Wellington was hiring temporary, she told herself. Yet here she remained, invisible labor in a visible world of wealth. She'd overheard multi-million-dollar negotiations while emptying wastebaskets, silently correcting mistranslations in her head. The irony wasn't lost on her. In a globalized economy desperate for cultural bridges, her skills hid behind a gray uniform. The U.S. job market in 2025 was a battlefield of its own. Post-COVID labor shortages still plagued the hospitality industry, with hotels like the Wellington struggling to fill low-wage roles. Reports from the American Hotel and Lodging Association painted a grim picture. 30% of hotel jobs remained vacant, pushing overqualified candidates like Sophie into roles far below their capabilities. She'd applied to 217 jobs in the past year, alone 63 interviews, 0 offers. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Student loan payment past due. She sighed, tucking her economic journal away. Another day, another room, another chance to practice skills no one knew she possessed. As she pushed her cart into the hallway, executives rushed past, their eyes sliding over her like she was part of the decor. Just another invisible cog in a machine built for the very important. At exactly 2 p.m., A fleet of black Mercedes SUVs glided into the Wellington Palace Hotel's circular driveway, their tinted windows reflecting the late summer sun. The doorman snapped to attention, his gloved hand trembling slightly as he opened the lead vehicle's door. Security personnel, clad in discreet black suits, emerged first, their eyes scanning the perimeter with practiced efficiency. The air in the lobby seemed to hum with anticipation. The usual bustle of guests cleared to ensure a flawless stage for the most important arrival of the year. James Carter, the hotel's general manager, stood at the forefront, flanked by his executive team, each wearing a smile polished to perfection. His heart thudded against his ribs, but his face betrayed nothing but confidence. This was his moment. From the second SUV stepped Mr. Wei Chen, a man in his 60s, whose charcoal bespoke suit and crimson tie radiated calculated authority. His movements were brisk, his posture that of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. Behind him followed 6 associates, each clutching identical leather portfolios, their expressions unreadable. "Welcome to the Wellington Palace Hotel, Mr. Chen," James said, extending a hand with practiced warmth. "We are honored by your presence." Chen offered a curt nod and a brief handshake before turning to his team, launching into rapid Mandarin. The musical cadence of the language filled the lobby, a cascade of syllables that carried the weight of strategy and scrutiny. James maintained his smile, but a flicker of unease danced in his gray eyes. The conversation was clearly more than pleasantries. Chen gestured toward the chandelier, the marble floors, then asked something pointed, his tone sharp with inquiry. James glanced at his smartphone, the latest AI translation app at the ready, a lifeline he hadn't anticipated needing so soon. One of Chen's associates, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s, introduced as Miss Clara Zhang, noticed James's discomfort. "Mr. Chen is sharing his initial impressions," she said in accented English. "He appreciates the architecture, but wonders about your capacity to cater to international clientele." "Wonderful," James replied, brightening. "Please let Mr. Chen know we've prepared the presidential suite to his exact specifications, and our chef has crafted a menu of authentic Chinese cuisine." He gestured toward the elevators, where staff materialized from nowhere to handle the entourage's luggage. In the background, Sophie Bennett pushed her housekeeping cart along the lobby's perimeter, her gray uniform blending into the shadows as per Lara Mitchell's orders. Her ears, however, caught every word of Chen's Mandarin, including his actual comment. "The decor is adequate, but I'm concerned about their understanding of our cultural expectations." James led Chen's group on a tour of the hotel's premium facilities, his voice smooth as he described the Japanese-inspired spa, the Michelin-starred restaurant, and the grand ballroom's potential for international conferences. Chen spoke primarily in Mandarin to his team, with Clara providing occasional translations. But James sensed gaps in the communication, critical nuances lost in the filtered exchanges. Chen's face remained a mask, his questions growing sharper, more specific. In the executive conference room, as James launched into the formal presentation, the stakes felt suffocating. "Our portfolio outlines the investment opportunity," he began, his team distributing leather-bound documents. "We've included market analysis, revenue projections, and expansion plans." Clara translated, but Chen's attention drifted. He gestured toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan's skyline and asked something in Mandarin, his tone insistent. Clara hesitated before relaying. "Mr. Chen is inquiring about zoning regulations in the local business district, specifically how they compare to Shanghai's policies for mixed-use developments." James blinked, caught off guard. "That's an excellent question," he said, buying time. "I can have our legal team prepare a detailed response." Sweat beaded at his collar as Chen fired another question, this time about recent changes to foreign investment tax structures under the 2024 Foreign Investment Act, a topic dominating U.S. business headlines due to heightened U.S.-China trade tensions. Clara's translation grew strained, her eyes flickering with unease as she struggled to keep up with Chen's rapid-fire terminology. Desperate to regain control, James opened his AI translation app, speaking into his smartphone. Could Mr. Chen repeat his concerns about tax structures? The app processed, then spat out, chicken tax and hotel mooncake. A stifled laugh escaped one of Chen's associates. Chen's expression darkened, his fingers tightening around his portfolio. James tried again, enunciating slowly. This time, the app produced, Foreign money tree law change question important now. The absurdity hung in the air like a guillotine. Clara, her professional mask slipping, translated Chen's sharp response. Mr. Chen wonders if you're properly prepared for this meeting. These are basic questions any hotel seeking international investment should anticipate. The room's temperature seemed to spike. James's carefully rehearsed presentation was unraveling into uncharted territory. He glanced at his executive. Team Sarah at the front desk, Pierre the chef, the financial controller, all staring back with mirrored helplessness. 20 years of career building, countless high-profile clients, and none of it had prepared him for this moment. In the hallway. Outside, Sophie Bennett moved silently, her cleaning cart a prop in her invisibility. 4 years of housekeeping had perfected her ability to blend into the background, but her ears were attuned to the Mandarin spilling through the conference room's cracked door. She winced at the mangled translations, each misstep amplifying the tension inside. Chen's frustration was palpable, his comments laced with references to municipal zoning codes and tax abatement, programs topics she'd studied extensively in her master's program at Beijing University. She caught his aside to Clara. If they can't communicate effectively, how can they serve an Asian clientele? The words hit Sophie like a spark. For years, she'd swallowed the sting of rejection letters, 300 and counting, each one a reminder that her skills were deemed overqualified or not a fit in a job market still reeling from post-COVID labor shifts. The American Hotel and Lodging Association reported in 2025 that 30% of hospitality roles remained unfilled, forcing candidates like Sophie into low-wage jobs while their talents gathered dust. She'd learned to stay in her lane after a previous hotel manager reprimanded her for helping Japanese guests with translation, warning that guests get uneasy when service staff act too educated. But Chen's comment wasn't just about the hotel, it was about her, about the cultural bridge she'd spent years building, only to be ignored. James's voice rose, his pitch betraying panic. Perhaps we should take a brief recess, he suggested, loosening his tie discreetly. I can have our financial team address these questions. Clara translated, but Chen checked his platinum watch, exchanging a glance with his associates. The unspoken message was clear. Their time was valuable, and it was being wasted. James backed out of the room, his confident facade crumbling the moment the door closed. Drop everything, he hissed into his phone, pacing the hallway. Get to the conference room and find anyone who speaks Mandarin. The financial controller, a harried man named Tom, arrived breathless from sprinting up 3 flights of stairs. I can cover basic tax implications, he panted. But international regulations? That's beyond me. James's assistant, Emily, reported that the language service used for Japanese tour groups had no Mandarin translators available for at least 30 minutes. We don't have 30 minutes, James snapped, his voice low but fraying. The food and beverage director suggested cross-referencing multiple translation apps, a desperate idea that fizzled when the IT manager explained the app's limitations with business terminology. Each suggestion hit a wall, the minutes ticking down like a countdown to disaster. Through the glass panel, Sophie saw Chen lean toward Clara, murmuring something that made her nod gravely. She caught his words. Perhaps we should focus on the other hotels on our list. The implication was clear. Wellington was failing a test not just of language, but of global competence. Sophie's hand stilled on her card. Her cleaning cloth paused mid-motion. The weight of decision pressed against her chest. A familiar tension from every rejection, every unpaid loan notice. Every day, her master's degree sat framed but unseen in her tiny Harlem apartment. 4 years of silence, of protecting herself. From disappointment, collided with a sudden searing clarity. If Chen walked away, he'd take not just James's promotion, but her own chance at something more. Her fingers moved to her employee badge, Sophie Bennett, housekeeping, a label that had defined her for too long. She removed her cleaning gloves, tucked them into her apron, and straightened her shoulders. The invisible woman was about to step into the light. "Excuse me." Sophie's voice cut through the hallway's chaos as she approached the conference room door. James spun, his face a mask of irritation. "Not now," he snapped, waving her off. "We're in a critical meeting." But Sophie's eyes were on Chen, who turned at the sound of her voice. She took a deep breath and spoke in flawless Mandarin, her tone steady and professional. "Respected Mr. Chen, I couldn't help but overhear your concerns about the hotel's readiness for international investment. May I offer assistance with translation?" The hallway froze, every head turning toward the woman in the gray uniform who had just shattered the script. Asterisk. The conference room of the Wellington Palace Hotel was a crucible of tension, its sleek glass table reflecting the strained faces of James Carter's executive team. The air felt thick, as if the weight of the botched presentation had sucked the oxygen from the space. Mr. Wei Chen, the Chinese billionaire whose investment could redefine the hotel's future, sat at the head of the table, his charcoal suit pristine, his expression unreadable. His 6 associates, portfolios open, exchanged glances that carried the weight of unspoken judgments. James, his tie slightly askew, stood frozen, the presentation remote in his hand rendered useless by the catastrophic failure of his eye translation app. The words, chicken tax and hotel mooncake, still echoed in his mind, a humiliating reminder of how quickly his meticulously planned meeting had unraveled. Into this charged silence stepped Sophie Bennett, a gray housekeeping uniform, a stark contrast to the tailored suits around her. Her voice, steady and clear in perfect Mandarin, had just shattered the room's expectations. "Respected Mr. Chen," she repeated, her posture straight despite the weight of every gaze. "I couldn't help but overhear your concerns about the hotel's readiness for international investment. May I offer assistance with translation?" The room froze. Chen's eyebrows arched, the first unguarded expression he'd shown since arriving. His associate, Clara Jiang, blinked, her professional mask slipping into surprise. James's jaw tightened, his eyes darting between Sophie and Chen as if she'd materialized from thin air. "What are you doing?" he hissed, his voice low but sharp with irritation. "This is not your place." Chen ignored James, his gaze locking onto Sophie with the intensity of a man accustomed to assessing value in an instant. He responded, in rapid Mandarin, deliberately weaving in complex financial terminology and a regional Shanghai dialect, testing her. "Your Mandarin is exceptional," he said, leaning forward slightly. "Perhaps you can explain how New York's new vertical zoning allowances might affect the mixed-use development incorporating hotel and retail spaces." Without hesitation, Sophie answered, her Mandarin flowing with academic precision. "The city implemented zoning changes last quarter under the 2024 Urban Development Act, permitting integrated commercial hospitality projects up to 40 stories in this district," she began, gesturing toward the skyline visible through the conference room's windows. The Wellington's location qualifies for dual-category tax incentives due to its position in both the tourism corridor and the international business zone. Compared to Shanghai's Pudong district, New York's regulations are more restrictive on height but offer greater flexibility in cultural programming, which aligns with your portfolio's emphasis on cross-cultural hospitality. Chen's associates straightened in their chairs, several pulling out tablets to jot notes. Clara, no longer the primary translator, observed Sophie with a mix of professional assessment and curiosity. James's shock gave way to a flicker of hope, though his expression remained taut with confusion. He couldn't follow the conversation, but the shift in Chen's demeanor engaged, almost animated, was unmistakable. Sophie continued, addressing Chen's earlier question about the 2024 Foreign Investment Act. The act introduced tax abatements for foreign investors in hospitality projects that incorporate cultural exchange elements, such as multilingual staff training or authentic regional design. For example, a property like the Wellington could qualify for a 15% tax reduction by integrating dedicated spaces for Chinese tea ceremonies or WeChat Pay compatibility, which are critical for your target demographic. Chen nodded, his stern countenance softening into a rare smile. "You understand our perspective," he said in Mandarin. "Most American businesses miss these nuances. What is your role here, exactly?" He gestured to her uniform, his tone curious but pointed. Before Sophie could respond, James stepped forward, his composure partially restored. "Miss Bennett is assisting with translation while we locate our professional interpreter," he said, pulling out a chair at the table. "Please, join us." His smile was tight, his words a band-aid over the awkward reality. He leaned close to Sophie, his whisper urgent. "What department are you with, exactly?" "Housekeeping, sir," Sophie replied, her voice calm despite the tension crackling around her. She took the offered seat, her employee badge * Sophie Bennett, housekeeping * Stark against her uniform. James's smile faltered. "Housekeeping," he repeated, as if the word itself were a glitch in his reality. His eyes flicked to Chen, who watched the exchange with keen interest. "And you speak Mandarin? How?" "I studied at Beijing University," Sophie said simply. "I hold a master's in East Asian linguistics and international business relations." The revelation hit James like a physical blow, his mind racing, to reconcile the housekeeper before him with the qualifications she described. "It was on my resume," Sophie added, her tone neutral but firm. "Page 2, under educational background." James's face flushed, a mix of embarrassment and frustration. He turned to the room, attempting to reclaim control. "Perhaps we should proceed with our presentation," he said, signaling his assistant, Emily, to distribute additional materials. "Ms. Bennett can translate my points for Mr. Chen, but let's stay on agenda." Sophie translated James's request, but Chen waved it away, continuing his direct conversation with her. "I'm more interested in your thoughts on how the Wellington can position itself for Chinese business travelers," he said in Mandarin. "Our research shows a 25% increase in Chinese family tourism to the U.S. in 2025, with a preference for multi-generational accommodations." "How would you address this?" James cleared his throat, his voice sharp. "Ms. Bennett, please explain to Mr. Chen that our presentation covers these exact topics." The underlying message was clear. Translate. Don't contribute. But Chen's attention remained fixed on Sophie, his posture signaling that she, not James, was driving the conversation. Sophie hesitated, caught between years of professional acquiescence and the opportunity unfolding before her. The conference room had become a battlefield of unspoken power dynamics. James stood at the head, clutching his presentation remote like a lifeline, his authority visibly challenged. Chen's associates watched with analytical interest, their tablets now filled with notes from Sophie's insights. The executive team, Sarah Peer, Tom hovered near the walls. Their expressions a mix of awe and uncertainty. The moment crystallized. For Sophie. 4 years of invisibility, 217 job applications, 63 interviews, 0 offers. All had led to this. She turned to James, speaking in English for the room's benefit. Mr. Carter, Mr. Chen is concerned that the presentation materials reflect Western assumptions about luxury rather than Chinese preferences. For example, he just mentioned to his associates that the lack of dedicated tea service areas and multi-generational suites could be a barrier for your target market. James's expression tightened, his knuckles whitening around the remote. And how exactly would you know what's in our materials, Miss Bennett? The question was pointed, almost accusatory. I don't, Sophie replied, her voice steady. But I heard Mr. Chen express that concern in Mandarin. She switched to Mandarin, addressing Chen directly. Mr. Chen, my name is Sophie Bennett. I hold degrees in international business relations and East Asian linguistics, with 5 years of study in Beijing. My background might help facilitate today's discussion. The room fell silent. Chen studied her for a long moment, his gaze moving from her uniform to her composed demeanor. A person with your qualifications working in housekeeping is unusual, he said in Mandarin, his tone a mix of intrigue and disbelief. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns, Sophie replied with dignity, her Mandarin flawless. But perhaps today, that path might benefit everyone here. Chen nodded slowly, then turned to James, speaking through Clara's translation. I would like Ms. Bennett to participate in this meeting, not merely as a translator, but as someone who understands both our cultures. If she has insights into serving Chinese clients, I wish to hear them. It wasn't a request, it was a directive. James's forced smile barely concealed his discomfort. Of course, Mr. Chen, he said, his voice strained. We're all about discovering hidden talent. Let's restart the presentation. He gestured to Emily, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of panic. The meeting was no longer his to control. Sophie seized the moment, addressing Chen in Mandarin. If I may, I believe your primary concern was the recent regulatory changes affecting foreign investment in hospitality, specifically the new municipal zoning codes. Chen leaned forward, his interest palpable. The city's tax abatement program favors properties that incorporate cultural exchange elements. Sophie continued, which aligns with your portfolio's focus on cross-cultural experiences. For example, integrating a Chinese cultural lounge could qualify the Wellington for a 15% tax reduction while appealing to your clientele. Chen's associates scribbled furiously, their tablets glowing with notes. Clara, now a secondary translator, watched Sophie with professional respect. Sophie seamlessly addressed Chen's earlier questions about vertical zoning, drawing parallels to Shanghai's regulations. This area was rezoned in 2024 to allow mixed-use developments up to 40 stories. She explained, gesturing to the skyline. The Wellington's location is uniquely valuable, qualifying for both tourism and business. Zone incentives. James watched, his astonishment tinged with unease. Chen's genuine smile transformed the room's atmosphere, the earlier tension giving way to a fluid, sophisticated discussion. You understand nuances that most Western businesses miss, Chen said to Sophie. This is refreshing. For the first time since the meeting began, James saw a glimmer of salvation, not in his carefully crafted slides, but in the housekeeper who had just rewritten the script. Asterisk. The conference room at the Wellington Palace Hotel felt like a stage where the script had been torn apart. Sophie Bennett sat at the glass table, a gray housekeeping uniform, a stark anomaly among the tailored suits of Mr. Wei Chen's entourage and James Carter's executive team. Her flawless Mandarin had transformed the meeting from a train wreck into a dynamic exchange, her insights into zoning regulations and cultural hospitality strategies earning nods from Chen's associates. Their tablets glowed with notes, capturing her every word. Yet the air crackled with a new tension, not between the hotel and its potential investor, but within the room itself, where power dynamics shifted like tectonic plates. James Carter, the general manager, stood at the head of the table, his presentation remote now a useless prop in his clenched hand. His face, flushed with a mix of relief and unease, betrayed the battle raging within him. Sophie's unexpected brilliance had salvaged the meeting, but it had also exposed a blind spot in his leadership, so glaring it threatened to eclipse his carefully curated reputation. Chen, his charcoal suit immaculate, leaned back in his chair, his gaze shifting between Sophie and James with the precision of a chess master assessing the board. His associates, led by Clara Zhang, watched with analytical interest, their earlier skepticism replaced by curiosity. Chen spoke in Mandarin, his tone measured but sharp, addressing Sophie directly. "Ms. Bennett, your understanding of cross-cultural business dynamics is impressive. How did someone with your qualifications end up in housekeeping?" The question, delivered with genuine curiosity, landed like a stone in still water, its ripples spreading across the room. Before Sophie could answer, James interjected, his voice tight with forced cordiality. "Ms. Bennett is a valued member of our team," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Her unique background is a testament to the Wellington's diverse talent pool." The words sounded hollow, a corporate platitude that failed to mask the awkward truth. He gestured vaguely at Sophie's uniform, as if it were a temporary oversight rather than a systemic failure. Sophie met Chen's gaze, her composure unshaken. "Life takes unexpected turns," she said in Mandarin, her voice steady but tinged with quiet dignity. "I've been seeking opportunities aligned with my education, but for now, I contribute where I'm needed." She paused, then added in English for the room's benefit. "Housekeeping is honest work, but I believe my skills can serve the Wellington in other ways." Chen's expression shifted, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face. He turned to James, speaking through Clara's translation. "Mr. Carter, I find it concerning that someone of Ms. Bennett's caliber is cleaning rooms rather than contributing to your international strategy. In my organization, we have talent identification programs to prevent such misalignments." His words were calm, surgical, but their impact was devastating, a critique that cut through James's carefully constructed facade. James's face reddened, his knuckles whitening around the remote. "There's clearly been a misunderstanding of Ms. Bennett's qualifications," he said, his voice strained with forced professionalism. "Rest assured, we value all our employees and are always optimizing talent placement." The corporate jargon rang hollow, especially after Sophie's seamless performance. The executive team, Sarah from the front desk, Pierre the chef, Tom the financial controller, shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between James and Sophie. Lavra Mitchell, the head of housekeeping, who had slipped into the back of the room, stared at Sophie with newfound awareness, her expression a mix of guilt and admiration. Inside, James's mind churned. 20 years of climbing the hospitality ladder, from front desk clerk to general manager, had been built on his reputation for flawless execution. He'd prided himself on running a meritocratic operation, yet here was evidence of a failure so fundamental it challenged his entire leadership philosophy. How had Sophie's resume page 2, Beijing University, gone unnoticed? Had he overlooked others like her, their talents buried under uniforms and job titles? The regional director's promise of a Singapore promotion loomed in his mind, now teetering on the edge of collapse. The board would hear of this within hours, and competitors would circle, whispering of the Chen disaster. Sophie, meanwhile, felt the weight of every gaze. 4 years of invisibility had conditioned her to expect skepticism rather than praise. She recalled her last hotel job, where she'd been reprimanded for translating for Japanese guests. "Stay in your lane," the manager had warned. The memory stung, but Chun's recognition was a lifeline, pulling her toward a possibility she'd almost stopped believing in, yet doubt lingered. Would her intervention lead to opportunity or another round of dismissal? She'd applied to 217 jobs in the past year, faced 63 interviews, and received 0 offers. The U.S. job market in 2025, still scarred by post-COVID labor shortages, favored automation over human potential, leaving overqualified candidates like Sophie in roles far below their capabilities. Chun's voice broke the silence, his Mandarin direct and commanding. "Ms. Bennett, I'd like your thoughts on how the Wellington can better serve Chinese business travelers. Your earlier points about WeChat Pay and multi-generational suites were insightful. What else would you propose?" James cleared his throat, his voice edged with desperation. "Mr. Chun, our presentation addresses these topics comprehensively. Ms. Bennett can translate, but I'd be happy to walk you through our strategy." His attempt to steer the conversation back to his script was futile. Chun's focus remained on Sophie, his posture signaling that she was now the key player in the room. Sophie took a deep breath, her mind racing. This was the moment to step back into the shadows or claim the stage. "Mr. Chun," she began in Mandarin, "the Wellington's current design incorporates elements valued by Chinese travelers, such as Eastern-facing suites and water features aligned with feng shui principles. However, there are gaps. The lack of dedicated tea service areas limits cultural authenticity, and the digital payment systems don't integrate with platforms like WeChat Pay or Alipay, which 80% of Chinese business travelers expect, according to 2025 tourism data." Chun nodded, his associates typing rapidly. "These are exactly the adaptation points we look for," he said. "What about competitor properties? How does the Wellington compare to, say, the Mandarin Oriental in Shanghai?" Sophie's response was immediate, drawing on her master's thesis research. "The Mandarin Oriental excels in localized guest experiences, such as on-site cultural workshops, but its New York property lags in integrating Asian payment systems. The Wellington could differentiate itself by offering bilingual concierge services and curated Chinese cultural events, leveraging its location in the international business zone." Her analysis was precise, grounded in data from Hotel Management's 2025 industry reports, which highlighted the growing demand for culturally tailored hospitality in the USJM's watched, his relief at the meeting's positive turn warring with discomfort. Sophie's qualifications outstripped most of his executive team, yet she'd been pushing a housekeeping card under his nose for years. He glanced at his team, silently signaling to stay quiet. The deal was being saved, but not by his hand. Chun's curiosity deepened. "You mentioned Beijing University," he said to Sophie. "What led you there?" Sophie translated the exchange for James's benefit, her voice steady. "I received a scholarship for international relations but became fascinated by language's role in global business. My thesis under Dr. Li Wei explored cross-cultural communication and luxury hospitality." Chun's eyebrows rose. "Dr. Li is my wife's cousin, a brilliant economist." The unexpected connection shifted the room's atmosphere further. Chun, now viewing Sophie through the lens of shared academic networks. James, catching only fragments, sensed the conversation's importance. "What's being discussed?" he asked, his tone betraying his exclusion. "Mr. Chen and I discovered a connection through my professor," Sophie summarized. "We're discussing how my research might inform his investment considerations." James nodded, his expression a complex mix of gratitude and unease. How had he missed this? The board's scrutiny loomed larger, their recent push for diversity and inclusion programs spurred by 2025's corporate day trends making his oversight even more glaring. Chun turned to James, his tone firm through. Clara's translation. Your hotel has potential for our portfolio, but I'm concerned about your talent management. Overlooking someone like Miss Bennet is not just an oversight. It's a competitive disadvantage in today's global economy. The critique landed like a scalpel's cut, precise and bloodless. James swallowed, his mind flashing to the American Hotel and Lodging Association's 2025 report. 65% of hotel staff held skills unrelated to their roles. Untapped resource in an industry desperate for talent. Ms. Bennet, James said, turning to Sophie with a sincerity he hadn't mustered before. It appears we owe you an apology and a conversation about your future here. His words were genuine, but the strain in his voice betrayed the cost of admitting his failure. Chen extended his hand to Sophie, withdrawing a black card with gold embossing from his pocket, presenting it with both hands in the traditional Chinese manner. My private contact information, he said in Mandarin. Should you consider opportunities with Chen International, I'd personally review your application. Sophie accepted the card with equal respect, her heart pounding. Thank you, Mr. Chen. It would be an honor. James, watching the exchange he couldn't understand, but whose significance was clear, stepped forward. Ms. Bennet, we'll discuss your role immediately after this meeting. His tone had shifted from dismissive to solicitous, a transformation driven by necessity. Chen nodded approvingly, but his parting words to James, via Clara, carried. Wait, I'll recommend the Wellington to my associates, but I suggest a serious review of your talent practices. As the meeting adjourned, the executive team escorted Chen toward the presidential suite for a celebratory tea service. Sophie lingered, her fingers tracing the edges of Chen's card. The weight of invisibility had begun to lift, but the vertigo of sudden recognition was dizzying. She'd stepped into the light, but what came next? The executive conference room at the Wellington Palace Hotel was quiet now, its glass walls no longer reflecting the frenetic tension of the meeting with Mr. Wei Chen. The leather-bound portfolios, once the centerpiece of James Carter's meticulously planned presentation, lay abandoned on the table, overshadowed by the seismic shift that had just occurred. Sophie Bennet stood alone in the emptying room, her fingers still tracing the edges of Chen's black and gold business card. The weight of her gray housekeeping uniform felt heavier than ever, yet lighter too, as if the act of stepping into the spotlight had begun to unravel the invisibility that had defined her for 4 years. The vertigo of sudden recognition pulsed through her, a mix of exhilaration and uncertainty. What came next? James Carter lingered near the door, his navy suit slightly rumpled, his usual air of control softened by something new contrition. He cleared his throat, the sound breaking. The silence. Miss Bennet, he said, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. Could we have a word in my office? His gray eyes, usually sharp and commanding, carried a flicker of vulnerability, as if he too were navigating uncharted territory. Sophie nodded, tucking Chen's card into her apron pocket. She followed James through the hotel's polished corridors, past the marble lobby where staff moved like silent gears in a grand machine. The irony wasn't lost on her. Hours ago, she'd been one of those gears, unseen and unacknowledged. Now, executives glanced at her with curiosity, their whispers trailing in her wake. Lavra Mitchell, the head of housekeeping, caught her eye and offered a hesitant smile, her expression a mix of pride and regret. Sophie returned a nod, her mind racing with the possibilities and risks of the moment. In James's office, a sleek space with a view of Manhattan's skyline, he gestured to a leather chair. Please, sit, he said, closing the door. The room smelled faintly of cedar and ambition, its walls lined with framed awards from James's 2-decade climb. He sat behind his desk, his fingers drumming briefly before stilling. Miss Bennet, Sophie, I owe you an apology. I had no idea about your qualifications. Beijing University, a master's in East Asian linguistics and international business. It's extraordinary. How did we miss this? Sophie's gaze was steady, her voice calm but firm. It was on my resume, Mr. Carter. I applied for a front office role initially, but housekeeping was the only position open. She paused, choosing her words carefully. The job market hasn't been kind to people with international degrees. I took what I could to pay my student loans. James winced, the sting of his oversight sharp. The American Hotel and Lodging Association's 2025 report flashed through his mind. 65% of hotel staff held skills unrelated to their roles, a systemic issue exacerbated by post-COVID labor shortages. He'd prided himself on running a meritocratic operation, yet Sophie's story exposed a crack in that facade. "I'm sorry," he said, the words unfamiliar in his mouth. "We failed you, but I'd like to make this right. Effective immediately. I'm offering you the position of Director of International Guest Relations, a new role tailored to your expertise. You'll report directly to me with a salary that reflects your qualifications." Sophie's breath caught. The offer was a lifeline, a chance to finally use her education, to move her student loans from delinquent to manageable. Yet years of rejection, 217 applications, 63 interviews, 0 offers made her cautious. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," she said. "What would the role entail?" "You'd oversee our strategy for international guests, starting with Asian markets," James replied, his enthusiasm growing. "You'd implement the changes you suggested: WeChat Pay integration, cultural programming, multilingual training. You'd be our bridge to investors like Chen." He leaned forward, his voice earnest. "Today proved you're more than capable. You saved us." Sophie nodded, her mind processing the shift. The role was everything she dreamed of when she returned from Beijing, yet the weight of her uniform reminded her of the years spent unseen. "I'd like to review the details," she said, her tone professional. "But I'm interested." James's relief was palpable. "Excellent. We'll finalize the contract tomorrow. And thank you, Sophie. Truly." As she left his office, the black and gold card in her pocket felt like a second option, a whisper of possibility beyond the Wellington's walls. 1 month later, Sophie stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor, her gray uniform replaced by a tailored charcoal suit. Her practical work shoes swapped for modest heels that clicked confidently against the marble. Her employee badge now reads Sophie Bennett, Director of International Guest Relations. The staff who once looked through her now nodded respectfully, their eyes registering the transformation. Her new office, a repurposed conference room, blended modern technology with cultural touches, a Chinese tea set on a lacquered tray, a bookshelf lined with linguistic texts and hospitality journals. On her desk sat 2 framed items: her master's degree from Beijing University, no longer hidden in storage, and a letter of intent from Chen International, confirming the Wellington as their newest portfolio property. The promotion had changed everything. The salary allowed Sophie to move her student loans to a sustainable payment plan, easing the financial strain that had shadowed her for years. More importantly, the role gave her a platform to use her skills fully for the first time since returning to the U.S. She'd spent weeks analyzing market trends, drawing on 2025 data from hotel management that highlighted a 25% surge in Chinese family tourism. Her first project, a dedicated tea lounge inspired by Fujian's tea culture, set to launch next quarter. But Sophie's vision extended beyond her own role. In her first week as director, she'd proposed the Hidden Talents initiative, inspired by her own experience and Chen's critique of the hotel's talent management. James, eager to align with 2025's corporate day trends, had approved it immediately. The initiative began with a staff survey revealing startling statistics. 40% of employees spoke a second language. 65% held degrees or certifications unrelated to their roles, and 78% possessed untapped skills. Sophie had already identified 17 employees with valuable abilities: a concierge fluent in Korean, a chef with a finance degree, a maintenance worker studying engineering part-time. Today, Sophie stood before 30 staff members in the main conference room, a mix of housekeeping, maintenance, front desk, and concierge workers. Each wore their standard uniform, but today, they weren't here to serve. They were here to be seen. Welcome to the first session of the Hidden Talents Initiative. Sophie began, her voice steady and warm. You're here because you indicated skills, education, or languages not currently used in your roles. 1 month ago, I was pushing a housekeeping cart outside this room. Today, I'm helping reshape how we serve international guests. That change didn't come from new skills. It came from making my existing ones visible. The screen behind her displayed the initiative's mission, recognizing the whole person behind every position. She clicked to the next slide, showing the survey results. This isn't just about languages, she continued. It's about understanding that every one of you brings your whole self to the Wellington. Our goal is to create pathways that align your talents with the hotel's needs. James stood at the back, his arms crossed, a nod of approval softening his features. The initiative was his idea, born from the humbling realization that Sophie wasn't an anomaly. How many others had he overlooked? The board, impressed by the Chen deal, had praised his innovative leadership, but James knew the credit belonged to Sophie. He'd begun reviewing resumes from the past 5 years, a quiet commitment to prevent future oversights. Among the staff, Sophie noticed a young man in a maintenance uniform, Javier, who had attended her session. His survey response had caught her eye, a part-time engineering student fluent in Spanish, working nights to fund his degree. Their eyes met briefly, a shared recognition of potential hidden behind a uniform. Sophie smiled, remembering her own journey. Excellence in service starts with excellence in our people, she said, her words carrying the weight of experience. Let's find your moment to shine. The Wellington was changing. The lobby now featured a pilot WeChat Pay system, a nod to Sophie's recommendations. A new suite design, tailored for multi-generational Chinese families, was in development, reflecting 2025's tourism trends. The Chen deal had secured the hotel's expansion into Asian markets, a triumph that had James fielding calls from corporate with renewed confidence. But for Sophie, the real victory was personal. Her office, with its tea set and framed degree, was a testament to a truth she'd almost forgotten. Her worth had always been there, waiting for the right eyes to see it dot as she prepared for a meeting. With a Shanghai business delegation, Sophie glanced at Javier, now adjusting a lighting fixture in the lobby. She'd already scheduled a follow-up with him, a step toward a role that matched his skills. The Wellington wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was a place where the invisible could become undeniable. The evening sun cast golden threads across the Wellington Palace Hotel's grand lobby, its marble floors gleaming under the soft glow of the crystal chandelier. The frenetic energy of Mr. Wei Chen's visit a month ago had settled into a quiet hum of transformation. The air carried a new rhythm, less frantic, more purposeful, as staff moved with a confidence that hadn't existed before. At the heart of this change stood Sophie Bennett, no longer a shadow in a gray housekeeping uniform, but a figure of authority in a tailored charcoal suit, her heels clicking with quiet assurance as she welcomed a delegation of business travelers from Shanghai. Her Mandarin flowed effortlessly, a melody of precision as she explained the hotel's newly launched amenities: a Chinese tea lounge, WeChat Pay integration, and suites designed for multi-generational families. The guests nodded appreciatively. Their briefcases and tailored coats a reminder of the global stage the Wellington now played on. Sophie's office, once a sterile conference room, was now a reflection of her vision. A lacquered tray held a traditional Chinese tea set, its porcelain cups catching the light beside a sleek monitor displaying market analytics. Our bookshelf, lined with linguistic texts and hospitality journals, spoke of a mind that had never stopped learning, even in the years spent pushing a housekeeping cart. 2 framed items anchored her desk: her master's degree from Beijing University, finally displayed with pride, and the letter of intent from Chen International, confirming the Wellington as their newest portfolio property. The deal, signed 2 weeks ago, had secured the hotel's expansion into Asian markets, a triumph that had the board buzzing with praise for James Carter. But Sophie knew the real story, and so did James. The Wellington was no longer just a hotel, it was a proving ground for potential. The Hidden Talents Initiative, Sophie's brainchild, had taken root with startling speed. The staff survey she'd launched revealed a wealth of untapped skills: a concierge fluent in Korean, a chef with a finance degree, a maintenance worker named Javier studying engineering part-time. 3 employees had been promoted within weeks, 5 received raises for using their language skills, and all felt the quiet dignity of being seen. Sophie's first session with the Hidden Talents Group, held in the same conference room where she'd once stood as an outsider, had been a revelation. "Your skills are not just your job titles," she'd told the 30 attendees, her voice carrying the weight of her own journey. "They're the whole of who you are. Let's make them visible." Javier, the maintenance worker, had become a symbol of the initiative's promise. Sophie had noticed him adjusting a lighting fixture in the lobby, his careful precision betraying the engineer within. Their eyes met briefly, a shared understanding passing between them, 2 people who knew what it meant to be more than their uniforms. She'd scheduled a meeting with him to discuss a role in the hotel's facilities planning team, a step toward aligning his skills with his aspirations. The initiative wasn't just about promotions. It was about rewriting the narrative of who belonged in the spotlight. According to a 2025 hotel management report, 78% of hospitality workers possess skills unused in their roles, a statistic Sophie had turned into a mission. The Wellington was now a case study in what happened when a workplace looked beyond job descriptions to the people behind them. James Carter, too, had changed. The general manager, once defined by his obsession with control, now carried a quieter authority. The Chen deal had saved his career, but Sophie's emergence had reshaped his perspective. He'd spent weeks reviewing old resumes, haunted by the question, how many others like Sophie have I missed? The board's push for day initiatives, spurred by 2025's corporate trends, had amplified his resolve. The Hidden Talents program was his idea, but Sophie's execution had made it real. Standing at the back of her first session, he'd watched her command the room, a mix of pride and humility settling over him. His Singapore promotion was closer than ever, but for the first time, he wondered if leadership meant more than climbing ladders. It meant building them for others. The hotel itself bore the marks of Sophie's influence. The lobby's new tea lounge, with its Fujian-sourced teas and minimalist design, drew praise from guests and critics alike. The WeChat Pay system, rolled out in record time, had boosted bookings from Chinese travelers by 15%, aligning with 2025's surge in Asian tourism. New suites, designed for multi-generational families, incorporated feng shui principles and modular layouts, a nod to Sophie's insights into cultural preferences. These changes weren't just cosmetic, they were strategic, positioning the Wellington as a leader in cross-cultural hospitality at a time when U-China trade tensions made such bridges rare and valuable. As Sophie guided the Shanghai delegation to the elevators, she caught sight of Javier again, now calibrating a smart thermostat with the same precision he'd shown with the lighting fixture. She smiled, a quiet promise to herself to ensure his talents, like hers, would no longer be overlooked. The Wellington was becoming a place where the invisible could become undeniable, a microcosm of what was possible when potential was given a voice. Sophie's story is more than a tale of personal triumph. It's a mirror held up to the world we inhabit. In every workplace, every community, every corner of our lives, there are people like Sophie, individuals whose brilliance lies hidden behind ordinary titles, unassuming roles, or societal oversights. Her journey from housekeeping cart to executive office speaks to a universal truth. Talent is not confined to job descriptions or uniforms. It exists in the quiet resilience of those who persist despite being unseen, in the courage of those who step forward when the moment demands it, and in the systems that choose to recognize them. In 2025, the U.S. grapples with a labor market still healing from the scars of the post-COVID era. The American Hotel and Lodging Association reports that 30% of hospitality jobs remain unfilled, forcing overqualified candidates into roles that undervalue their skills. Meanwhile, corporate America's push for day and skills-first hiring, programs highlighted in Forbes and Harvard Business Review, underscores a growing awareness. Overlooking talent is not just a personal failure, but a competitive disadvantage. Sophie's Hidden Talents initiative reflects this shift, a reminder that every organization holds untapped potential waiting to be discovered. But this story isn't just about workplaces. It's about the human cost of invisibility. Sophie's 217 job applications, her 63 interviews, her years of pushing a cart while her master's degree gathered dust. These are the stories of countless others. The cashier with a coding certificate, the janitor with a poetry manuscript, the barista with a knack for data analysis. Their worth is not diminished by their titles. It's simply waiting for the right eyes to see it. Sophie's courage to speak up, to claim her place, challenges us to ask, who are we overlooking in our own lives? What might happen if we looked closer, listened harder, and gave the invisible a chance to shine? This is the power of stories. Like Sophie's, they don't just entertain, they provoke. They remind us that silence protects systems, but courage rewrites them. The Wellington's transformation wasn't just about a single deal or a single woman. It was about redefining what it means to see value in others. In a world increasingly connected yet divided, where cultural bridges are both vital and fragile, Sophie's story is a call to action. Find the hidden talents, amplify the unheard voices, and build a future where no one's potential is left in the shadows. If Sophie's journey moved you, if it sparked a question about who might be invisible in your own world, don't let that spark fade. Subscribe to Legacy Stories now and join a community dedicated to uncovering the extraordinary within the ordinary. Every week, we bring you powerful narratives that challenge assumptions, celebrate resilience, and reveal the brilliance hidden in plain sight. Hit that like button, share this story, and become part of our mission to document change and amplify truth. At Legacy Stories, we don't just tell tales, we uncover the moments that redefine what's possible. Sophie Bennett's story is a reminder. Every untold story has a voice, and every voice deserves to be heard. Subscribe today, and let's discover the next hidden talent together. Because in a world full of unseen potential, the right story can change everything.